Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. 5 most important breakout players for this Ole Miss program heading into 2024. And these are some of my favorite episodes to do during the offseason where, we've talked extensively about this Ole Miss program. It is no secret to those who've been rocking with the fellas the last couple of weeks and months. This is not only one of the most exciting teams heading into 2024, it is one of the most dangerous teams across the country as well. And a lot of the conversations that you're going to hear around this Ole Miss team, Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, Walter Nolan coming in through the portal, all really good football players. There's a lot of players on this team that if they break out in 2024 are going to be massive assets for this Ole Miss program. It gives us an opportunity to kind of highlight our guys heading into 2024, fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Ole Miss fans. It's been a blast talking this program, but I think more importantly, the amount of support you guys continue to show to the fellas, it truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, we all get the opportunity right now to call our shots heading into 2024. Would love to hear some breakout candidates for you guys as well. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start with a cornerback that you're not going to see on preseason, all SEC teams, but come the end of November, a guy that I think we're going to be talking about is one of the best cornerbacks in the conference is Trey Amos. And I think one of the misconceptions about Trey Amos is that he was a reserve player for Alabama, not a ton of playing experience, just kind of some potential. And although that might be half true, you look back at Trey Amos at Alabama, played over 320 snaps, and the conversations that you heard around Trey Amos heading into 2024 that he was going to be Alabama's cornerback number one. He hits the transfer portal, comes to Ole Miss. I think you're looking at potentially one of the best cornerbacks in the SEC. And why is that so big for Ole Miss is you look at all the elite wide receivers that not only are you going to see in SEC play, but what you're going to see in the college football playoffs, if you have a cornerback that can just kind of take away some of these wide receiver ones, take away half of the field, that's a massive story for Pete Golden and this Ole Miss defense. And I think Trey Amos has the capability of kind of being that cornerback for Ole Miss. You take a look at last year's numbers, there's a 45% completion percentage when he was targeted. Only gave up 9 catches all year, didn't miss a lot of tackles. This was a really good player for Alabama coming to Ole Miss. And if you get a true cornerback one, massive storyline for Ole Miss going to number 2. And the Ole Miss fans who've been rocking with the fellas knew we weren't going to talk breakout players and not talk about Suntarine Perkins. Now, you look at Suntarine Perkins as a true freshman. I don't know if Ole Miss fully kind of knew how they wanted to use a guy like Suntarine Perkins, who came out of high school, was just kind of a freak athlete. The position was a little bit ambiguous in terms of we're not really sure where we want Suntarine Perkins to slot in. Going into year 2, I think they have a better idea of how they want to use a guy like Perkins. And you look at Perkins in this modern day college football landscape, and this kid's an ultimate chess piece. He can play that off-ball linebacker spot. He can go sideline to sideline, be kind of that eraser. He can match up with running backs out of the backfield, tight ends up the seam, and then he's a guy that might be his best asset to this Ole Miss defense is getting after the passer. And so I think the challenge for Ole Miss, and I'd say challenge in terms of it's easy to use Suntarine Perkins, you just want to make sure you're putting him in the best spots to be successful, is all right, do we have a clear picture of how we want to use a guy like Suntarine Perkins, spying the quarterback, rushing off the edge, so many different ways that he can impact a football game on the defensive side of the football. And I think there's an argument that he is the most gifted player on this Ole Miss team just from a physical trait standpoint. If this kid can break out as being kind of the Harold Perkins of this Ole Miss defense, which I certainly think he's capable of doing, that's just another massive storyline for this Ole Miss defense. And again, you look at where Ole Miss wants to close that gap against these top programs in the SEC. It's on the defensive side of the football. Perkins can be one of those guys that helps Ole Miss close that gap. Now, moving over to the offensive side of the football, another guy that I've kind of spent the offseason just banging the table for. And there's a lot of national media conversation regarding how Ole Miss is going to replace a running back like Quinshon Judkins. And I'm not trying to take a shot at Quinshon Judkins. He's been a very good running back for Ole Miss the last 2 years. Ulysses Bentley, when he got his opportunities, I don't think it's crazy to start talking about him being a guy that can go for over 1,000 yards in this Ole Miss offense. Just absolutely electric with the football in his hands, especially when he gets the football in space. And you look at Lane Kiffin, what is he a mastermind at doing? Getting his players in the positions to be successful on the offensive side of the football. You look at Ulysses Bentley, explosive plays are an integral part in kind of what Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin want to do on offense. I think a guy like Ulysses Bentley can be that kind of running back for Ole Miss. He's going into his 6th year of college football, averaged 3.5 yards after contact last year per carry. I think there's this narrative that Ulysses Bentley's a scat back. He's not an all-purpose back. I don't think that is true. You go back to the film in 2023, and I don't think it's crazy to say that he was the better running back than Quinshon Judkins in his limited opportunities that he had. Now he's going to have an opportunity to get some more touches every single Saturday. I think you're looking at a running back that could massively break out for this Ole Miss offense. And I got to give the Ole Miss fans the assist on this one. Now, we've talked extensively about this Ole Miss wide receiver room, right? Juice Wells coming through the portal, Trey Harris being one of the best wide receivers in all of the country. It is a loaded wide receiver room, not to mention a guy like Jordan Watkins, who I think is a very, very underrated wide receiver 3 in this Ole Miss offense. Talk about breakout players. We have to talk about Deion Smith, right? 6'3", 200 pounds. Y'all told me to go watch some of the JUCO film. I did that. This kid's special from a physical trait standpoint, and he played some pretty damn good football at LSU during his freshman year in 2021. I'm not sure if Deion Smith is going to be a quote-unquote starting wide receiver, but it does seem like it's hard to imagine him not getting opportunities to be a difference maker for Ole Miss. And if he can just add another chess piece to this Ole Miss offense, I don't know how many defenses are going to match up with the personnel Ole Miss has. And you look at Deion Smith, I think what's so important to note is there is just so many ways that he can attack opposing defenses, right? He's a guy that can win vertically down the field, has a track and field background, can go up and make some of those contested catches, attacking that deeper third. But he's also a wide receiver that is an animal after the catch. I mean, the short area quickness, the ability to make people miss, and then also just having a big physically imposing frame that just not a lot of defensive backs can necessarily deal with. I think there's a lot of ways that Deion Smith can get involved in this offense. We all know Lane Kiffin, going back to our conversation we just had about Ulysses Bentley. We know Lane Kiffin is really good at scheming his players' opportunities. Again, I don't know if Deion Smith is going to be a quote-unquote starter in this Ole Miss wide receiver room just because of how good that wide receiver room is, but you make no mistake about it. We're trying to find those game-changing plays to get Ole Miss over the top. Deion Smith can be a guy that provides some of that juice for this Ole Miss offense. Last player on the offensive side of the football I want to talk about, and another one of just those, my guys, if you will, Daequon Wright, coming over from Virginia Tech, caught for over 500 yards during his first two years, with Virginia Tech, in a passing attack that was almost non-existent for Virginia Tech for the majority of his playing career at Virginia Tech. He comes to Ole Miss as, again, just another chess piece. We're talking about 6'4", 250 pounds, that runs an 11-second 100-meter dash. I love Caden Prescorn. Caden Prescorn is going to be a very good player for this Ole Miss offense. Daequon Wright, from a physical trait standpoint, I think is a more talented tight end in terms of being a pass-catching weapon. And again, how does Lane Kiffin decide to get Daequon Wright involved in this Ole Miss offense? That's why he gets paid the big bucks. But I think we're all very confident that you give Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin all of these chess pieces, Lane Kiffin's going to be able to figure it out. I think this kid's a matchup nightmare. You take a look at how you want tight ends to look, tight ends that are just too big and physically imposing for defensive backs to deal with. Daequon Wright at 6'4", 250 pounds certainly falls under that category. You want to put a bigger defensive back or maybe a linebacker on him. He runs an 11-second 100-meter dash. He's going to run right by these linebackers up the seam. A lot of ways you can get him involved, get him in the flat, yards after the catch, certainly another avenue that Daequon Wright can excel in. Again, I don't know if he's going to be the starting tight end, but he's going to get his opportunities, and he is a tight end that can give you some of those explosive plays. Another matchup nightmare for this Ole Miss offense. And again, it is, and we've talked a lot about Jackson Dart. We've talked a lot about Trey Harris and Princely Yu and Walter Nolan. In my mind, we know what those guys are. They're going to be difference makers for Ole Miss. I think the big conversation for this Ole Miss team heading into 2024 is, can you get some of these names that we just talked about to really break out in 2024? Because that is how I think Ole Miss reaches their potential during this 2024 season. Fired up for this program. A lot more to talk about during the summer months. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.